Hi, I'm Nate Scheer, and you've joined MindForce, a podcast dedicated to exploring love, life, and learning. Here, it's all about making sure your mind matters. Today, we have Jack Glennon, and today we'll be talking about overcoming adversity and redefining identity, authentic leadership, and great culture in business. Jack, I'd like to give you the floor. Can you tell us the who, what, why? Who are you? What do you do? And why are you here?
Thank you very much, Nate, and thank you for having me on your podcast as well. It's brilliant to be here. What an introduction. So my name is indeed Jack Glennon. I'm the founder of Glennon Pete Coaching, which is an online coaching business where I specialize in leadership, culture, and career coaching, as well as specific like sales and executive, but really focusing on those areas. And that's really formulated from my journey of, like you said, redefining my own identity and definitely overcoming adversity along the way and learning a few lessons through my own mistakes and a few mistakes of others too.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on the show. I'd like to mention we do have a couple firsts today, at least for me. This is, as far as I know, the first podcast that I've ever done in the morning, which is kind of cool. I had to offset for the Australian. And the second one is having an Australian. So that's super cool to be bouncing the signal all around the world. I'm from the UK, at least for the next 3 years, and we're talking in Australia. So the world is a small place. So, Jack, I want to give you a chance to ask me a question before we dive into the interview.
Yeah, I'd love to. What drove you, I guess, to begin doing a podcast? I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself and your history. What was your kickstarter going? I want to send a message out to the world. What was your real turning point?
Yeah, so I was pretty apprehensive. I mean, the online world is a pretty cool and also pretty cruel place. But I went home and I was moving from Florida over to the UK, and I was going through some stuff at the house of my mom's, where most of my like larger stuff still resides as we kind of bounce around the world. And one thing that just kept coming up time and time again, I'm looking through these report cards as a kid, now being almost 40, looking back at these things my mom probably still shouldn't have. But in every single one of these report cards, like, Nate's a joy to have in class, but talks way too much. And so I kept kind of going back and forth and kept realizing that we have certain gifts and tools that are given to us, and it just feels a shame to waste it. So hopefully talking too much, getting myself in trouble, going to detention, I think that hopefully goes to help someone. I lost my grandma as a kid to mental health and not being able to discuss things. So I really wanted to have conversations, and really the podcast, it's focused on mental fitness and things like that. But really, I just want things to make people's lives better. If it's tools, if it's tricks, it's a journaling. So sometimes, I throw out the invite to guests and like, well, I'm not a mental health expert or something like that. We can all get a little bit better. So I hope if anyone is listening, just come on the show, tell us about your life. I think just sharing stories in itself really helps us to connect with others and get better. So I'm hopefully using my talking talent. I don't know if it's a talent, but my ability that I was given for good use. So we'll move
I
into
love
the
that. That's
interview. The
brilliant.
first
And you're right,
question.
sharing stories does.
Sorry, Jack. Go ahead.
I was just, basically reiterating, sharing stories does make a huge difference because it's why part of the reason I love doing it as well is you're sharing your own journey and others can see themselves in your journey and makes them understand it a little bit more and feel less alone and also give them some tools, like we said, to help them navigate at the same time.
And I think that's super important too in this new world with social media and things like that. We highlight all the successes, we highlight the family trips. We don't highlight the negative as much. And not that we want to sit and dwell on the negative, but I think when you are sitting in your own house and you're stuck, it's nice to hear, other people are going through it. And so sharing the stories, I think, really helps us. Like, I'm not the only one. There is hardly anything I think that ever happens in this world where you're the only one that's ever happened to. Like, that would be shocking if that was the case. But we'll move over into overcoming adversity. So the first question I want to ask you, Jack, can you take us to the major adversity you faced and share how it reshaped your identity?
Great question. I'll try and do a cut down version because the journey of adversity had a couple of moments. Starting off in 2019, when I was in my early 30s, believe it or not, to look at me, and really accumulating throughout 2020. So in 2019, I was away on a business trip with the colleagues, a sales conference effectively. And we all, after anyone who's been in any conferences know that at the end of the day, you often go for a couple of beers, maybe some dinner, a bit of a fun time. And just arriving at dinner, very odd thing happened because I walked into the restaurant and my left leg, my left foot felt like it was magnetized to the floor. It's a very bizarre thing to think, but that's definitely what my mind went at the time. My leg was very completely numb, and the feeling was slowly going up my leg to my hip. And I remember sort of dragging myself to the end of the table, sitting down, and I took my shoe off, which was a very big mistake, by the way. Sort of trying to, it's pins and needles, what's going on. And I noticed everyone was starting to get more drinks, and I'd only had one beer by this point, and they're getting shots. And I was like, maybe that's not a good idea. Wise decision. In general, life is probably a wise decision too, but we all make mistakes. But a friend of mine was going outside for a cigarette, and I did smoke at the time. To be fair, I don't anymore. And I was trying to grab his attention. Going, can I join you? Like, yeah, no worries. Come on. I was like, can you help me? Without anyone noticing, which is a challenge within itself. But anyway, we did succeed, and we got me out on the street where there was a bench, and this feeling or lack of was going slowly further up my body. And so got to this point here, leaning kind of like that on this bench. The feeling subsided. I was like, okay, maybe it's trapped nerve, fine, no dramas. And then it came back really, really quickly. So the decision was made to go to hospital. And I asked someone who came out just to see where we were. So I said, just tell everyone my knee's playing up and I'm being grumpy and I'm going back. And, you don't want to ruin people's fun, right? And I was begrudgingly being taken to hospital. So we got to ER or A&E, depending on where you are in the world. And usually what happens in this situation is you lean in, you tell them what's wrong, and they go, cool, brilliant, lovely to see you. Sit down and wait for 3 hours, at least. This was the first sign that I knew I was in trouble, because that didn't happen. I'm leaning there with very little feeling on my friend, bless him, who to this day I count as someone who is family to me, because he was with me until like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning this night. But the door swings open, and they go, here's a where's your... I think a wheelchair.
Stretcher?
Bloody hell, my mind just went blank. Oh, no, not quite. That came later. A wheelchair. Put me on that and wheeled me through as quick as you can imagine. Lifted me up onto a bed. I was surrounded by doctors and nurses. Shirt was off, not in a fun way. Lots of things were going on with different things, basically measuring everything part of my body. And I'm lying there in a bit of a panic because I feel fine. I'm talking as I'm talking to you now. It's all very confusing and very invasive. And I've always been someone who's very adventurous and very active. I was a scuba diving instructor for many years. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro by this point and done lots of adventurous things around my life. Always been mindset. Bless my poor mum. I think I put her through the ringer on that one. But laying there, and I sort of glance at my friend, and he's looking very worried, but he's sort of trying to nod and try to reassure me. And I hear a doctor say the word stroke. And it's at this point, real fear starts to kick in. And confusion going, I can't be having a stroke. I think I was 32, 33. I'm young, I'm relatively fit, I'm healthy. All right, probably shouldn't smoke, but everything else I'm pretty good. This is not right. Surely this can't be. But anyway, as things proceeded throughout the night, the signs and symptoms went up and down. The worst it got is I got a numb tongue. So I lisp, basically, I couldn't really talk. And because I was away, I actually had a flight back home the next day. So as the feeling throughout the night came back, I had effectively like a nurse physio. I was doing tests with strength tests of my hands, whether I could grab a finger and push back on my foot. And she was quite incredible because I was determined to go home. I was determined to get on that plane the next day. And there's this mindset you'll hear over the course of the story of overcoming adversity through stubbornness to a certain degree. Of going, I'm fixated, I'm going home. So every time I won this test, I would get an hour off and off towards my release. And so I ended up getting released and coming home. And I was stuck at home for at least 2 weeks. I can't drive because they didn't know what had happened. They thought it could be a stroke, but they couldn't really fix anything specific. I had to do lots more tests once I was home over the course of the next month. And the first neurologist that I had, he wasn't great. And he basically told me, look, we don't know. You're young, you're fit, you're healthy. Take aspirin for 6 months as a precaution, but carry on. Your body's probably had a hiccup. Which is interesting to say the least in terms of an approach. It's the first time I started not to trust my body in my life, which it does change your mentality. I didn't mentally deal with the situation at all. I got very angry a lot throughout about a month, just confusion and frustration. One of my ways to deal with it was within 2 months, I completed stupidly with 3 friends of mine a Tough Mudder, which I don't know if you're familiar with what Tough Mudder is, but anyone is, and it's a huge obstacle course. 21Ks we ran, or well, I walked most of it, let's be honest, but lots of obstacles. It's about pushing your body to the limit and fun and probably not something you should have 2 months after you just had a stroke, or potentially. So that was my mentality, to a little bit stick 2 fingers up to what had happened and kind of everything and everybody, and go, right, I'm going to take aspirin, but this is not going to be my life. This is not going to be my identity, because every conversation I had with everyone was, are you okay? Are you all right after what happened? Do you need time? No, go away. Leave me alone. I'm fine. Didn't deal with it great. Fast forward, so 6 months passed and all fine. This was March, April 2019. And I had a trip booked with a friend of mine from the UK into India. Again, a little bit extreme, driving tuk-tuks the length of India. Amazing. Recommend anybody to do it. Awesome. So this was January 2020. And unfortunately, in the middle of this effective race, it happens again. So we're in the middle of India, middle of nowhere, and I'm buying fuel and oil out of the hole of the wall. I'm walking back to the tuk-tuk, and I slowly go down, very slowly go down, losing the left side of my body. There wasn't fear this time. There was a lot of anger. And the anger came back just in terms of frustration. I swore pretty much every word you can imagine. Anyone that's experienced a stroke, you know that there's a taste. And it's a really, really hard to explain. There's like a metallic taste. I know the taste now so well. I know what this is. But I've had it before and I've been okay. So I'm going to be okay. Kind of stubbornness, take control. So my poor friend, who was looking very pale, was told very bluntly, get me back to where we're standing. Get me laying down, and I will pop aspirin, and I'll try and raise my heart rate to try and push through whatever the hell's causing this and going, because I will get better. Now, probably a normal person at this point would go to hospital after this has happened, but I'm in the middle of India and I'm going, well, I don't want to bridge that, and I've got a bloody race to finish. So I'm going to get better. Tomorrow I'm going to be able to walk, and we're going to finish and have a bloody good time. And I'll deal with this when I get home. So that's exactly what I did. But when I could walk, I could walk by the end of that night. And we carried on my journey and had an amazing trip. Getting home, I did something a little bit odd to some people. I didn't share what had happened with my wife or my mum, who's in the UK. And some people find that a little bit odd, but there's reason behind it. It was my way of dealing with it, or the starting way of dealing with it. I wanted to go to a doctor and find out what's going on, because I knew if I told them what happened, they would ask lots of questions that I had no clue, and it's only going to make it more difficult for me. So I did lots of more further tests, and at this point I had to tell my wife, because I was starting to wear like a Holter monitor, which is a heart monitor thing people might not know, which was you have to have for 24 hours. So she was going to notice. So there's certain things I had to share with her. I had actually a different neurologist at this stage, and I can't commend her enough. She was incredible, because she did one very different thing that a lot of them do. She showed me the scans of everything they took from the whole body, so she could really see. What she found is that I'd had, in fact, 3 bleeds on the right-hand side of my brain. So when the third one happened, who knows? But as anybody may not know, a full-on bleed on your brain is effectively a stroke. So at this point, I'd had 3. And I was firstly thankful to still be around. Secondly, thankful to be pretty much unscathed, other than my taste buds had changed a bit and I had a bit of a lisp, which was then starting to get better. So then it was a matter of finding out why. Why is this going on? We found out that when we're born, we have a partition in our heart. We have that all the time. But when we're born, it's open. And when you take your first breath, it closes. It seals. Mine for 33 years, it hadn't sealed. And apparently it's not that uncommon, but when I was born, it wasn't checked at all and wasn't picked up. So all the time that I've been underwater or on the top of a mountain, if anything like this had happened, I would not be here. I'd be screwed. So what needed to happen was heart surgery with an incredible device, which is a fan that basically goes through both partitions and it opens up on each side. And as the rod's pulled out, it seals. Really, really small, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if anyone's following, because I'm trying to keep this as short as possible, because I know you've got lots of other questions. This is now March 2020. So what else is going on? COVID's kicking off. So to add to complications, I'm having to do all this on my own. I'm getting, I can't go in with anybody. No one can come and see me because COVID, it's locked down effectively, which still does put different mentality on these things. The way I dealt with the year before is I threw myself into work, and I had the heart surgery that year. And the day after, so that was the Thursday, the Friday, I'm on my laptop, and most people will be watching Netflix, reading a book. I'm working, which is not healthy and not wise. And this kind of ties in with business culture, which I know you might get to. But to give you an idea, my leader did everything he could to make sure I didn't. But I was actually talking to various people online on Teams, including the HR director. And I reflect back now, and I was behaving badly. I shouldn't have been doing what I was doing, but they should have disconnected me. And they didn't. They actually enabled it. And it's all around the fact that where I used to work has a big culture of we're a family. And in the corporate world of family, it's very dangerous, which I'll get to later. But that was the first indication, which I reflected later. Anyway, so the heart surgery happens. I'm okay. I'm fine. I go home. On the Tuesday, my wife is away. She's actually in hospital that night. She's giving plasma. And my heart at 7 o'clock, virtually to the dot, goes mental. Goes highly rhythmic and goes to a beat I've never experienced before. So fast. Out of the blue and immediate. I'm panting and sweating. I throw up. I feel dizzy. All not good signs. Like an idiot, I don't call an ambulance. I call my neighbor to say, should I call an ambulance? Because I think it's more a blokey thing. He tends to want to look at me and nearly pass out himself from fright and goes, yeah, ambulance now. So they turn up and they get me in the ambulance on my driveway and we don't move. And so I'm panting away, feeling quite confused, going, why are we going anywhere? And they explained to me my heart rate is going at 230 beats a minute. And they are concerned that I'm going to go into cardiac arrest. And if that happens, they're going to need someone else here as well. Like, okay, cool. Understand the reason. 230 beats is very, very high. For anyone that's not sure, it's very dangerous. So getting to hospital, what they do is they give you potassium and magnesium through a drip. And I can't remember which one, but one of them hurts, like having your arm squeezed. And again, it's COVID. My wife can't see me. She's home now. She's been found out from the neighbors what's going on. She can't come in and see me. So I went in this cubicle on my own, panting away, and I called my mum back in the UK. And I'm telling her what's going on. And this is at the pivotal moment, because at this moment, nurses walk in at a pace and go, this isn't working. We have a big thing to do, and we've got to do it, which is to put you out, and we're going to defibrillate your heart, because we're going to stop it. We have to stop it, and then we're going to try and restart it again. And that's the only option we've got, which is quite daunting to hear. And talking to my mum at that point was filled with fear, very much so as the year before. And this is a really odd thing to describe, but the moment I said goodbye to my mum, which I was effectively doing, because I didn't know whether I was going to speak to her again, and I've got so much sympathy for her, because I can't imagine what that was like for a mother to hear. The moment I hung up the phone, I went calm. I was fine. And some people go, oh, well, were you good with dying? Were you fine? Were you ready to go? I'm like, absolutely not. No chance I wasn't. I went to a mindset, which I didn't consciously do, it just happened, and I use this analogy or some metaphor of I was playing poker and I had one card to play. And if I'm coming back, I'm damn well playing it. So I started to verbalize, you're going to wake up. You're going to wake up. You're going to wake up. I just kept on saying it out loud until I passed out. And then thankfully, as obviously you can tell, they brought me back. So it worked, and they played with my meds. Now, this event happened another 2 more times over the course of the next 2 weeks. And the third time, they couldn't actually defib me because there was too much risk to my heart to do it again. So I actually had to just wait it out over the whole night in hospital. It's a great way to lose weight, by the way. Shed loads. But the course of the next 6 months, again, I was playing with medication. And when I was given the all clear, because basically what was causing that was my heart was inflamed from the surgery. and it was really upset, really angry. So it was all over the shop, and the meds were running out at about 7 o'clock at night, and they just hadn't got the mix right. So I was on medication for about 6 months. And when I went to see my surgeon and the consultant, I wanted "you're fine, off you go to live your life." Because for that 6 months, I wore a Fitbit, which my wife bought, which is a brilliant idea. But I had to keep my heart rate really, really low, no stress on it. So, no more than a brisk walk. So no fun, no sports, no excitement, no drinking with the boys, nothing. Thankfully, COVID was going on, so it helped, but, it was still elements of that. So when I had the meeting with them, they were non-committal because they're looking after themselves to a certain degree, which I get. They were, just be careful. You probably shouldn't do that. And I wanted, I'm fine. I didn't get that. So what I did was similar to what I did the year before with Tough Mudder. That day, I went out and got incredibly drunk with a load of friends. I went and partied and went, I'm fine. I'm clear of this. This is not going to define me. And again, it's my way of putting two fingers up. Not smart. I wouldn't recommend it. It was my way of putting two fingers up. So that was, and it's something I still deal with today. I'm physically fine. There's no reason why I should have a stroke. But when you second guess your body and you lose that trust, what happens is mentally it changes a little bit. But also what I do now is anytime my body feels a bit odd, like we all do, say, when you stand up too fast, you look at the sun like a fool. I pinched my index finger with my thumbnail, sorry. And I know if I can feel my thumbnail and my index finger, I'm fine. It's just that almost, and it happened organically. That's as shortest version as I could, so it's quite long.
No, that's good. When you said you were in Australia, I figured when the story started, it was a scorpion or some, of the 100 different things that can kill you in Australia. But the stroke was a different turn. And it's interesting. The one thing I kind of thought of as you were talking through that is how powerful the mind is when you have a goal. I mean, we've heard different things where, a work center or whatnot, and maybe it's not the best example, it's kind of in a negative aspect but when everyone kind of hates the boss or something like that, when they have a unified, the other one, you wanted to be normal again. One thing I wanted to ask you, just as it came up, it really made me think about it. I lost my dad a few years ago. It was really interesting because, he was coughing a little bit. His lymph nodes swelled up a little bit, but he was still biking and going to work and, it seemed relatively healthy. And so it's one thing, it kind of scares me and it's just kind of confuses me at the same time where we can be relatively healthy, walking around, doing all the things we normally do. And then you go in and then they're like, hey, you have stage 4 cancer. And so, ultimately he fought through it, tried his best and, ultimately lost the battle. But I'm curious in your stance where you have this, groundbreaking, shocking thing. How is it different when it's just world altering versus like slowly over time? Do you have any thoughts on like the shock and awe versus like slowly getting sick?
Great question. A brilliant question. I think so relevant to so many different people. The shock is huge. The shock factor is massive. I think that can do a lot to mentally and probably ergo physically as well. I think it depends on the person. Some people like a band-aid ripped off. You hear the term, or prefer over a death of 1,000 cuts. I know for me, it was the shock was horrific. And actually, to go back to one of your points before, I actually don't regret any of it. There was a horrible journey that I went on, but all of it helped me become the person I am today. I feel for people close to my wife and my mum specifically. It was horrible for them, but for me, it was a journey that I'm grateful for in so many ways. But yeah, I think for me, it was the shock factor was horrific. But once I got my head around it, and once I knew and I could control it, I was like, okay, now I know what I'm dealing with. Now I know what I need to do. So it was easy to handle. The long-winded thing is hard at the same time because how much control do you have? It's also about how much life do you have? That's a big, big element because so much during that time of not knowing what's wrong or not knowing what's causing it, you go, well, I can't plan anything. I don't know if I'm going to be here at 6 months. And I'd like to plan a holiday with my wife or, buy that car or go, yeah, I'll be at your birthday or, or someone's wedding or whatever it might be. Your whole life is on hold because you just don't know what's wrong with you or don't know how long you've got or don't know if this is going to prevent you from doing it. So that's a huge element to it. And I think that's a huge element more how it affects people because it puts your life on hold. and it takes away your identity as just someone who's living your life.
Yeah, that's good. I wanted to ask, like, what were the mindset shifts that you took place? You had that stubbornness and things like that. How did you process to overcome that challenge and then ultimately redefine yourself? You moved through stubbornness, but what was the mindset shift?
Stubbornness came up a few times. I'm someone who can be a little bit stubborn. I think that's helps in many ways. I'm definitely, the goals you mentioned are perfect because I did set myself goals along the way. Even to this year, we had a monumental moment. I mentioned before I was a scuba diving instructor. That's actually how I met my wife. Bit cliche, she was my student. But this year we went diving for the first time since before had my first stroke. And that was massive because when you have a stroke, I don't know if I'm allowed to again. So I got a dive medical and was cleared. And that was huge. It was such a big part of my life, but something really special for us. So these little goals that you put in place and go, that's not going to define me. That's not going to stop me living my life means so much. And your mindset does shift. As I mentioned, I got angry a lot in the early stages because I just didn't know how to process it because I didn't know what I was dealing with. And it's that lack of knowledge that gives you that reaction of push back on anything, push everyone away, deal with it some people recluse, some people go with anger. I definitely did the latter. And once I started to know what was going on, it was easy to process. And the prime example of that, ironically, is the first time I went in with my heart complications after surgery, fear, talking to my mom was really upsetting, and then I was calm. The second time I went in, I was going, "Hi, ladies, I'm back. How you doing? See you again." Because it was so soon after the first time, and it was, "I know this is, yeah, calcium, magnesium, cool. Yeah, I know you're going to zap me. It's fine. I'm ready. Okay, put me out." It was, it was almost. I remember, making light of the situation in many ways, going, "I know what's going on. Yeah, you can put me out. I know there's a chance I might not come back, but I did it once, and I do it again." I had control because I knew what was going on almost. And then it was a matter of just going step by step by step.
That's interesting. It's interesting how powerful normal is. I like that you mentioned that. That's something that you had done, that you brought you joy and things like that, and getting back to that. And it's interesting how the world is small. Like you said, knowing the area of the UK that I live in, and I'm actually a certified dive master. I got like 100 to 200 dives or so there in Guam when I was stationed there. I never made it to the instructor level, but I am a DM. So I can take like one or two people, but it's interesting, common things, as we talked about stories earlier, the things that we do together that brings us, joy and whatnot, going too deep and getting narked and different things like that. But I'm
It's
glad
huge, though. It's huge. I was so determined. And I remember getting quite stroppy with my mum at one point because she kept on sort of asking, how am I doing? Are you okay? I'm like, stop asking if I'm okay. I know it comes to a good place. I don't want to talk about it anymore. This doesn't define me. Ask me about anything, about work or about how my wife is doing or about how Australia is. I don't want to talk about what happened, because it's not the first. I don't want to be the first thing people think of anymore.
Yeah, try to get back to that normal. So that kind of touches on the personal impact to you. Can you touch on how overcoming that adversity changed your perspective on leadership?
Yeah, massively. It's interesting. It's something I talk about quite a lot. Everyone's going through adversity, the people that come forward and support you aren't necessarily the people you expect. That's a constant that I've found throughout my life. The ones that come forward are often the ones that surprise you, and the ones that you expect, sometimes the ones that can't handle it or don't know how to handle it and just kind of go, "Oh, too scary, you can't, push back." So, I saw different people deal with, and my journey in terms of leadership, some well and some pretty poorly. And what I lean on a lot at the moment, and I talk to people a lot, is about emotional intelligence. And it's a big passion of mine. And I think it's something that's devoid in a lot of leaders. And I've experienced it myself. And I remember talking to my leader, I had another leader about a year later, who we were in a bit of disagreement with, and it got a little bit heated. And they blurted out how, basically how they supported me while I was ill. So I owed them. And my response was less polite. Because that's a horrific thing to say to someone. You just can't, you just shouldn't in any context, let alone a professional one. So I learned a lot through others and through how they performed and through my friends as well, and how amazing some of them were. And Because I think in many ways, everybody can be a leader, in just how they behave. And, again, I go back to my friend who was with me that night the first time. I'll never forget the look he gave me later on when I was really upset and I was laying there, and I remember I was cold, I was shivering. I just looked and I could just tell he was saying, "You're going to be okay." And just that reassuring look. And we both now seen each other at our lowest of lows. And I love the guy to bits, just like I say, his family, and that's leadership in so many ways.
Find it so hilarious how we seem to ingrain in our minds much more the people we don't want to follow. I know that the positive ones are always there, but it always seems like when you ask stories, like, I don't want to do that. So it seems like we always learn. I don't know. I want to say more, but it seems like we learn more from the ones that aren't that great. Unfortunately, it just seems to
Very
stick with you a
much.
little harder, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I've always been someone when talking to people about leadership and also myself being a leader, I've gone, I'll never try and be another leader, because if I do, I'll get found out tomorrow because I'm me. I can take little traits and I can take ideas and I can take, ways of approach from other people and put them into me, but I can't be that person. So when anyone ever asks me, oh, do really inspires you? I'm like, no one, because I'm me. I find certain things that people would say, I've got certain quotes from Gordon Ramsay or Simon Sinek that I'm like, that's brilliant. I love that. Or I love that. I love that. But I'm not trying to be Gordon Ramsay. I think if I try, someone would laugh at me. Whereas you see I've seen a lot of leaders that I'm like, I would never do that to someone ever. And that sticks in your mind because it's so against the grain of who I am that it sticks in my brain.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wanted to ask, we have a lot of buzzwords in the military and, maybe throughout different organizations. But one that I think comes up a lot, I don't know if it's just coming up now or maybe it's always been there, but authentic leadership. What does that actually mean?
To me, or too general, because I think there's probably two different things.
Well, what's the quote unquote right answer?
To me, authentic leadership is being true, being openly yourself, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable with at the same time. Not always having the answers, being the person with the answers in the room. I think, and I something I did do, and I've done all my previous leadership roles, is if someone in my team asks me a question I don't know, I'll go, I'm not sure, but I should know, so let me go and find out for you. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. So authentic leadership is that willingness to embrace others' opinions, others' knowledge, others' strengths over your own, and be vulnerable with it at the same time. Be authentic to you and don't compromise.
So I think everything in life is in balance, right? So I'd like if you could expand just a little bit more. I'm curious, how do you balance opening up and being vulnerable? But like myself, I'm in a leadership position at work. How do you balance not pulling the team down with negativity, but remaining real?
Great question. I think if you're in a really down place yourself, as a leader, you should have people to lean on, whether it's a mentor or a coach or a leader yourself. So it's about channeling that negativity in the right place in the right way. If you're having a meeting with your team and they're going, Nate, you're right, you seem really, really down right now, it's absolutely fine to go, I'm having a bit of a tough time, but I'm getting, I'm talking to a few people. I'm actually really on a good track. Being just that little bit vulnerable to go, thanks for picking me up. I'm obviously giving that off that I'm not okay. Otherwise you wouldn't have noticed it. You are right. I'm not great, but I'm doing something about it. So you're not putting it on them. You're being vulnerable enough to be open to go, yeah, I'm human like anybody else. You're not going, no, I'm fine, leave me alone, which a lot of people do, and pushing them away. And they're going, well, I'm not stupid. I know Nate. He's clearly not okay. And now I'm going to start thinking, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why, which makes it worse. By being open and vulnerable, going, no, you're all right, but, I'm working on it. But thank you so much for asking. How's things with you? Yeah, it's just that respect to be open a little bit, but not putting it on their shoulders.
That's good. I want to just take one more. It's kind of a continuation of this one, but I'd love to hear your advice. So I'm in the medical sector, so I'm a healthcare administrator. And in the United States Air Force right now, we're going through a lot of changes with the Defense Health Agency, and we just did a new electronic health record. And there's always changes going on, but it feels like right now we've gone through more changes and all at the same time, more than we have in quite some time, or maybe it's just because I'm in the middle of it, but it seems like through social media and things like that, you hear about it more and more. So when you have changes and maybe changes that are seen in a negative way, as the leader of the section, how do you keep the team pressing forward, focus on the goal like we talked about earlier, but still saying it's going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. And I think, again, it must be back to balance. Like, you can't say everything's going to be rosy, it's going to be great. No, it is going to be difficult. But how do you keep people moving forward and not poisoning the well, but also being real? Because you would hate to say, like, oh, I love this, it's going to be awesome. So how do you balance, I guess, bad news within a section?
Great question. The first thing I'd say before answering it is you're not alone, and it's not exclusive to you. I'm seeing more companies restructure and change than I've ever seen. I was part of one myself earlier this year. But literally, I mean, people I speak to, I've got clients, I've got friends, redundancies, layoffs left, right, and center. The state of the financial world is not in a good place. The impending election is putting more fear in companies and industries across the globe at the same time, not helped by, obviously, various wars that are going on. So companies are looking for every way to save money. And unfortunately, post-COVID, there was a big spike of profits for a lot of places, and they are still expecting those profits, which is unrealistic, especially in the current economy. But therefore, to do that, they trim the fat, so they speak, which I hate the term, but it's also commonly used. So firstly, you're not alone. Secondly, to answer your question, it's really tough, right, in that situation, because and something I talk a lot about when I'm talking about redundancies and layoffs, when I'm focusing with people who've been made redundant or laid off, and it's horrible for them. It's career redefining. What do they do? Their self-worth a lot. It's also the people left behind. People left behind in the business. Do they trust the business anymore? Do they trust the leadership anymore? How do you focus them on the common goal? How do you bring them back in after things might be torn apart a bit? Trick is to firstly keep the consistent messaging and communication so key. Again, I use the term, don't try and be the smartest person in the room. If there's information you feel you can share with them, do it. Don't hold back. Don't try and go, I'll let them know later because, well, I think that's probably the best for them. As much information for them as possible will empower them to know more. The other element is treat them each as individuals. They're all going to be different people with different backgrounds, with different priorities in their lives. Find out what individual goals they have and try and build those in to not necessarily the day-to-day, but the week, the month of their working time. So you're building in a bit of a development plan that's focused on them. So whilst this overall goal of the business or the organization's there, they can actually also ingrain their own personal development plan into that at the same time. So they feel there's always progress. And with you as their leader, who is being open to supporting them on that journey, to invest in your time and your effort in that journey, they will feel the backing there, and that will give them uplift. At the same time as being authentic and honest about going, I'm actually excited for the next stage. I know it's really tough now, and all that stuff that you mentioned before, keeping the messaging consistent. But the combination of the two, I think, would really help.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. I think, we touched on goals again. People want to continue moving, and, I think there's nothing worse than being stagnant. I know, people say they don't quit their boss or things like that. They really quit because they don't feel like they're being challenged, or they're just sitting in the same spot. In this section, though, I did want.
Sorry to interrupt. Big one note is people want to feel valued and heard, which is huge. So if you're seeing your team discontent or upset, especially when there's a period of unrest and a period of change, they will be less than ever keen on sharing and keen on opening up, because they'll be worried about, if I say that I'm a bit upset or a bit annoyed by this, I'm putting my head above the parapet. So I'm not going to do that. The more you can encourage that safe environment, talk about psychological safety within a team, again, the more you'll benefit out of it as a team and as individuals.
Oh, I'd love to ask a question on that. In the military, we have this thing called the open door policy. I don't know if that's like across the board or whatnot, but commanders and whatnot will say, I have an open door, just swing by. And it's one thing that kind of drives me nuts a little bit, going back to buzzwords and things like that. It sounds great, but a lot of times, the feedback, or they don't want to hear, or they just want to, be reinforced on what they want to do. What are some advice for building that, not just saying the door is open, but building that safety?
Great question. There's two elements to that. Firstly, the open door policy is great in verbal and in principle,
Sounds
but
great.
you've got to practice it. And every leader in every company is always going to be busy, right? So how you practice that is by communication. If your team calls you, you go, you text them and go, I'm in a meeting, I'll call you back in an hour. You call them back in an hour. The moment you drop that ball, you've lost their trust. Trust is so easily lost. It's easier lost than gained. So that's the first thing that I would say in terms of the open door policy. You've got to approach it and you've got to make sure that you're staying to the standards of communication of your team, but still allowing time to push back. You might have a Tuesday completely blocked out going, guys, I need this Tuesday clear. This is what I can't tell you too much. I don't need to tell you everything that's going on, but just I've got Tuesday blocked out. Unless the world is burning, please just flick me an email. I'll pick it up at the end of the day or call me first thing Wednesday. Allow yourself that buffer. But again, that comes down to communication. The other element to it is what I would do, and which comes back to people's development, is I would actually try and give each individual an hour of your one-on-one time a month. So whilst you've got an open door policy, you tell everyone about it with your team. So they know that 1 hour, 2 o'clock on Friday, for example, it is you and Steve, for example. And everyone knows that you and Steve are together for that 1 hour. So no one in your team calls you unless the world's burning down. So there you can focus on Steve's development. You can share what's been going on, how it's tracking, where he's struggled, where his wins have come from. But the biggest thing that I find successful is you give them a forum for feedback. And you go, and I've always used a stop, start, continue method. Tell me as a leader one thing, if you've got any, that you'd like me to stop, that you'd like me to start, or that you're really finding useful, you'd like me to continue. You don't, as a leader, necessarily have to agree with all three. I had a great example once of someone telling me, can you stop doing that? It's really annoying me. And I had to disagree. I said, I'm not going to stop, but I know now why you feel that way. I'll change my approach because let me explain to you why I'm doing this. And once I explained the reason, the rhyme, and my method behind it, he completely got it. So I'd have given him a forum to speak at grievance and speak, this is actually frustrating. This is annoying me. I heard him and I explained to him the reason why. And that was so empowering for him. He's like, cool, great. I feel confident now that I can have a conversation with you and going, this is making me feel, put up or whatever it might be. And we could easily talk about it and work through it. But it's their time.
That's awesome. Reminds me of my favorite quote from Fierce Conversations by Susan Scott. She says, multiple realities exist simultaneously. So the person being annoyed, and how they felt, that exists. And then you needing to do it for a certain reason also exists. But you not understanding why the other person's doing it, was the thing in the way. But I did want to ask you, going back to the vulnerability and things like that, do you have a specific story where you were able to open up and something, that really showed your team or something like that, like a real world example of being open and how that impacted the team?
Great question. So yes, actually one of the first teams that I took on in the previous company where I was at, I was given the promotion into a leadership role in the midst of going back and forth to hospital. So my leader left the business. I think it was the Friday, what we told about on the Wednesday, not in particularly good terms. I heard two different versions from either side, so I'll never know the full story. But I have a lot to owe my leader, that leader. I had so much respect for him. He was such a linchpin within the team. So to lose him was huge. And we were told he was going on the Wednesday on a Teams call. And the moment that Teams call dropped out, the two directors called me straight away and offered me the role. And I was asked, can you give me the night to think about it? I knew I was going to take it, but I want to speak to my wife and etc. And the next day, I'm on my way to hospital in the late afternoon, because it happened a bit earlier, it happened about 5 o'clock rather than 7. And I'm panting, talking to my leader, going, I'd like to take that job, please. Again, stupid. But I took on this role, and on the Monday, my leader had left. The team was pretty much falling apart. I was also remote. I was far away from the rest of the team. So a lot of new leaders in this position put their stamp down and go, this is the way it's going to be. And they find the most experienced person a threat, so they push them away. My first port of call was not to disrupt things. What I did is I let the morning work in progress meeting with everyone, the same structure as the week before. And I was open. I was like, team, I'm going to need your help. I'm here to support you, but I'm going to need you to support me. I've literally got thousands of emails from our previous leader that I'm trying to sift through and understand. I know, but my challenge was to bring everyone together. And what I did is I assumed a sports metaphor, which I've always used in leadership. I was the new manager coming to the team and I needed to lean on the captain. So I leant on the most experienced person in the team quite a lot. And he was ironically, he was the same person who was with me in the hospital that first time. So he was the person who knew me on that personal level, who I vented to on the side and could really let my guard down and be 100% vulnerable with, but therefore bring it back with the team and go, guys, I'm really struggling. Give me 3 hours on Friday to just get through this. We're going to get through it together, but I'm not there. So please, I need your support. And it was that very authentic approach and vulnerable approach that really helped us. Effectively, I went to rebuild a team and ultimately became a very successful one.
So reflecting back on that, would you do it the exact same way?
100%. 100%. I've seen leaders, young leaders as well, come in and their insecurities.
Kick the door in.
Yeah, they kick the door and they push people away and they ostracize the ones who they think are a threat. And it doesn't work in the long term. And it doesn't create that psychological safety in the team. It doesn't create unity in the team. I definitely made some mistakes, and like we all do, but in my early stages of leadership, there were certain meetings that I took that I was like, oh, I could have done that better. But that's why you ask for feedback. That's why you're open to it and you go professionally, respectfully, give it to me. What could I have done better? And that's a journey. No one nails it on the first try.
It's interesting too, for me, being in the military and being in that leadership type role. I think that they want us to be strong and A-type and have no bad days and whatnot. And I kind of took that when I first got into the role, but now being in 7-8 years on this side, I found it just completely the opposite. And like we talked about earlier, balance, right? Like I can't come in every day and, be crying and things like that. There has to be some level of balance. But what I do now is I come in and I, tell them, a little bit about myself, the wave tops, at the beginning, because I don't want to, go too in deep off the bat. But once or, whatever that time frame is, I go through about how, I lost my dad and my grandparents and I co-parent and I've been through a divorce and these things. And like, it's not to sit here and be, a negative Nancy, but I hope that it bridges the gap. And I really want to try to attack the open door thing. Because I'm like, if I'm going to say open door, like, I want you to know that I am not on a pedestal and I'm not much different than everyone else on the team. So I'm not going to say I've been through the exact same thing, because that's another thing I think that's, pushes people away. We're like, oh, don't try and, say the exact same thing that, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, something relatable and, I'm not too far away. And, like, do you want me to listen and try and process that? Or do you want me to try to fix it? I think that's another thing that's really important for people, because I can start making phone calls, call the different agencies and get this thing fixed. Or is it just, a vent session where you need to, word vomit all over and then walk out and feel a little bit better?
That's great stuff. That's great psych safety and EQ as well, showing that empathy. I love that clarity of what would you like me to do? Do you want me to fix it and get on it? Or do you want me to hear and just be here for you? Because at the end of the day, as leaders, we're dealing with people. And that's the core of it. You're dealing with people. Everyone's different. Everyone's got different approaches. Some people thrive in an uber alpha environment. Some guys do, right? And, I remember growing up and having a rugby coach who screamed at us, and we were the best team that year. I hate uber alpha environments now. I can't stand them. I don't thrive in them. If someone shouts at me now, I kind of lose respect for them. Thanks. You get people who need an arm around the shoulder and they need a kick at the backside. Everyone's going to have a different approach, but if you get your people right, cool, the results should 9 times out of 10 be shown to see.
And if you know your people, right? If you know the people, you'll know which ones need what. And I think that goes back to, like you had said, goals and things like that. Some people want the day off. Some people want to go to school. Some people want to, do different things. And so it's interesting in organizations, we always want to do the blanket, like everyone gets a day off or everyone gets this. And some people want that or like recognition's another big one. I think like some people want that thing on the side in their room by themselves, and other ones, want it in front of the crowd and want that public publicity and things like that. But yeah, humans are a very complicated thing. I wanted to ask one question as we transition over to that business culture. What do you think are the core values that build a great culture in business?
Really good question. Integrity, transparency as much as possible. You can build authenticity into that. And you mentioned that the value itself, value of people, being a people-centric business and really being a people-centric business. And I touched on it before, so I'll sort of circle back because it's something I'm quite passionate about, having lived through it. The dangers of it that I speak to a lot of people to now. So it's around the corporate world or the bigger organizations as well. And this isn't to pick people off working for corporations or big organizations, because there's some fantastic people and some amazing jobs, and God, you can have the best of times. It's more about being corporately savvy, as I use the term, because every business talks its core values. We're integrity, we're intelligent, whatever it might be. Talk about being family, I would be very, very cautious of. And I know this from having experienced it myself, but also seeing it in others. And there's two reasons why. One, just talked about all the time, because it's the mantra of, if you're in an organization where we're all family, you work more, because you feel that sense of it's what we do, because we're all in together. So I'm going to go over and above for my family, by the way, I open my arms up and go, I not only drank the Kool-Aid, I spat it out as well. I completely privileged. We're a family as a leader for so many years. So I'm very open and honest about that, to know I went on that journey, but also went out the other end, because you do go and above. And I go back to, I'm in hospital. I've got wires coming out of everywhere, and I'm working. You idiot! What are you doing? You're not getting paid for that. That's just crazy. That gets talked about quite often. The bit that doesn't is actually a bit that I'm more passionate about. And it's because organizations and businesses of a large, and of all varieties to some degree, have to behave like corporations and organizations and businesses. And what that means is sometimes things will go wrong, where you have disagreements, where you have disciplinaries, where you have ultimately redundancies and layoffs. And in these businesses where the family culture is shoved down your throat so much that you bleed it, that many people do, including myself, when that happens, it can do unbelievable damage. And I've seen it in a couple of people. One person, for example, was about 6 years. 6 years is still not over it now, because they were ousted, and it was the best time of their life, and their life hasn't got back on track since, because they were lost. Even myself, getting made redundant, it happens all the time. You can cope with it and deal with it. But when you're that in, you lose your sense of identity. You get that sense of you don't want me anymore. I'm not part of this family anymore. I'm not valued. I'm not loved, if you like. It's like a breakup. And that's not normal. That's not normal in business. That's not normal in life. It's not healthy, because corporations need to behave that way. They need to go, spreadsheet, we're losing money. Where can we save it? Sorry, we've got to lose 10 people. It sucks, but it's just reality, and that's how a lot of businesses work, and that's fine. That's just life. But you can't have both, because the damage can be, irreparable to a certain degree for a long period of time, where people lose that trust in who they work for, who they work with, and it's really, really dangerous.
That's interesting. I'm one that's always done the family thing. So now I guess I got to ask, like, what is that replacement, or how do you, have a team and keep them on the same page, but don't go into the family atmosphere?
Great question. I think to come back a step, family businesses are awesome, but I think what I would encourage people to go is think of what family business is in your mind. And when I say that, people often think of, a small deli with mum and pop and granddad, have had it for generations. It's amazing. The more of those we have, I think the country, the world will be a better place. Probably better food as well, to be fair. But be it. There's nothing wrong with being a team. There's nothing wrong with being part of a team. It's not a family, though. There is real distinction. You can be valued in a team, but you're an employee. You're an employee of a business, of an organization. But you can have, within an organization, you can have your own team, and you're really close, and you become mates. and your mates after you work there. You know, I've got close friends and people I used to work with, you know, from different industries and different businesses. They're also mates. That doesn't change because of where I work. But some of them have progressed through life as what I would count as family, but it's got nothing to do with where they worked. I say a lot to people this term: fall in love with a job, don't fall in love with a company. Because you can love your job and you can have a passion for your job, and it can give you a sense of value and a sense of purpose. And you can take that job loads of places in the world, loads of different organizations. Don't fall in love with a business or a company, because I'm sorry, but the company will never love you back.
Dang, those are good words. Okay, Jack, what's one piece of advice or wisdom you'd give our listeners to hold on to after hearing your story?
I give two, one of my own and one stolen.
Absolutely.
The stolen one is, I referenced him before, is from Gordon Ramsay, and I watched a great interview with him recently. He's talked about adversity a lot, and how he was dealt a lot of adversity when he was younger, when he was growing up, and with his brothers, drug addictions and all sorts. And there's someone I have a lot of respect for. And he talked about adversity in a sense that the earlier you're dealt a hand, the better, because it helps build that resilience. And no one grows without resilience, without adversity. And he used a great term. He said, never be afraid of the storm. Get comfortable dancing in the rain, which I just love that. I think that was awesome. So that's the stolen one. The one from me is one I trying to tell everybody, really, which is, in your lowest of low moments, when you're really struggling, look up and have a look around. See the people that have stepped up, stepped forward, and that are still here, not just at the beginning, but throughout that journey of your adversity and your struggle, because they are the truest reflection of who you really are. And because of that knowledge, you know you're going to be okay.
One I'll pass over to you, Jack. It's one of my favorites, one of my very first episodes. I had the wonderful Laura on the show, and she went through a suicide attempt and then had to go inpatient for a little while. But one of the tools I gave her was called the paper plates. And I'd never heard this before, but it's one of my favorites. Is if you have a single paper plate, you're at the cookout and someone puts a big hearty meal on your paper plate, it's going straight to the ground. But every time you go through things and you've gone through the hard thing and you're adding paper plates, and so when you do get that big meal or that hard thing that goes through, you built up those paper plates. And so I love the visual of the representation of resiliency. We don't get that, right off the bat. We don't get it by going through the easy things. It's the difficult things that are adding up those paper plates that maybe, are now more like a porcelain plate at some point. But the paper plates I thought was great, because I've heard rubber bands and bouncing back and things like that. But the stacking of plates after going through difficult situations, I thought was really good.
That's fantastic. Great one.
Well, thank you, Jack. I encourage listeners to share their thoughts on social media. We got the Facebook, the Buzzsprout, YouTube, TikTok, trying to get all over the place. With the time that I got, it's time consuming to create content, but hopefully helping someone out there. Thank you much for coming on the show, Jack.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Well, I love you all. See ya.